In Psalm 121, the psalmist Nevis assures us that our help comes from the Lord. He reminds us that he, the maker of heaven and earth, will not let our foot slip. For he, the Lord, who watches over us, neither slumbers nor sleeps. He watches over our going out and our coming in. So let us now look to the hills, to him from whom our help comes. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your mercies which are new every morning, for health and for strength for this day, with its fresh opportunities for work and service. Bless each member of this assembly. As I stand in the gap for them, I pray that your help and your guidance will be made available to them as they face the duties to be done, the decisions to be made. Father, you have promised the gift of the Holy Spirit to those who seek it. So we come to you, dear Lord, for light and direction. Pour out your Spirit upon them now, so that they will see as with your eyes. They will understand as with your mind. As these men and women meet to deal with the business of government, business you have given them to do, may your Holy Spirit guide them through uncertainties. Save them from self-will and the placing of desires before responsibilities. May they seek your will, not their own personal desires. Show them, Lord, how to both serve you and fulfill their duties towards those of us dependent upon them. Give them wisdom in this hour, O Lord, and when they see your way, give them the grace to follow it. Help them, O Lord. Keep guard over their lips. Save them from words that hurt, slander, and disfigure the truth. Let them speak only to encourage, to cheer, and to keep others on their feet, so that all their words may minister grace to your honor and your glory. O God, holy and just, you exalt a nation that follows the way of righteousness. We pray for this land and its people. May we become worthy of your gracious favor. Deliver us from arrogance, pride, greed, prejudice, and ill will, from discord and strife. Inspire in us such love for our neighbors and concern for one another's welfare that we work together to secure opportunity and due reward for all, especially those less fortunate than ourselves. Lord God Almighty, grant each member of the gift of wisdom and understanding, counsel and strength, that they may not become weary in well-doing, but work to promote freedom, justice, and peace for the people of this federation. Lord, be thou the beginning and the end of all, the pattern from whom members follow, the Redeemer in whom they trust, the Master whom they serve, the friend to whom they look for empathy. May they never shrink from their duty, and make us like your Son, faithful, and bring us at last into the everlasting presence, where the Father and the Holy Spirit lives and reign forever. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be upon each of you today and forever. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Magdal. You may be seated.
Confirmation of minutes.
Honorable members, we will consider minutes of July 8, 2020, which were circulated, and those are minutes with respect to the opening of Parliament at the Marriott. Any amendments?
Mr. Speaker, you mind if I sit or should I stand? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Page 2 of the minutes. Absent, you say, were 3 persons. I propose you strike absence of the Honorable General Clerk. At the time of the opening of Parliament, she was not a member, and so with your permission we could strike that she was absent because she was not yet appointed.
Very valid observation, member. Sure, I would agree with that. One cannot be absent. All that one of the member would have been appointed the day before the first sitting after the opening of Parliament. Is that correct? Yes. Any other amendments?
Page 4, sorry. The paragraph which begins at the conclusion of the throne speech. I would recommend that instead of just describing His Excellency as Sir Tapley, that we either add Sir Tapley Seaton Governor General, or we could just put His Excellency the Governor General.
So what's the recommendation again?
You could put His Excellency Sir Tapley Seaton Governor General, or just simply put His Excellency the Governor General. But the Sir Tapley is, I don't think it is.
Okay, we can add Seaton then. His Excellency Sir Tapley Seaton, Governor General. Agreed? Yeah. Any other amendments?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on page 2, the final paragraph says, the Honourable Prime Minister Timothy Harris, member for St. Christopher 6, that should read St. Christopher 7.
That's correct. We have St. Christopher 6, should be St. Christopher 7. Yes. And I should add at this time that going forward, seeing that these are the first set of minutes distributed and there are a number of new members and various portfolios, I would advise members to review the portfolios as we have written them here to ensure that they're correct and we're not missing any important information.
Mr. Speaker, page 3, third paragraph, the last sentence should be all members took the oath of allegiance.
Page 3, last paragraph.
No, the third paragraph, last line.
Third paragraph, last line. All members, we have take, that should be took the oath of allegiance. And that's correct, right? No one affirmed, right? Everyone took the oath of allegiance. Thank you. Each member has checked his portfolios. Everything in good order? Thank you. The question is that the minutes of July 8th, 2020.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker.
No problem.
On the first page, I think there's an edit with the Honorable Eugene Hamilton. On his portfolio should be National Health Insurance. There should be no comma between health and insurance.
Minister of Human Settlement, National Health. We delete comma after health, yes.
Okay.
That's interesting, Honorable AG. So with that comma, it has two different, National Health or insurance. Yes, that's interesting. So we remove the comma. Any other observations, amendments? I'll put the question. The question is that the minutes of July 8, 2020, as amended, be confirmed. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The minutes are hereby confirmed.
Messages from the Governor General.
There are no messages.
Announcements by the Speaker.
Just two brief announcements. The Clerk of the Assembly, Mrs. Sonia Body Thompson, is unavoidably out of office and so would be absent from this sitting. And secondly, the Office of the Clerk would have written to the Leader of Government Business and the Leader of the Opposition on August 28th, inviting nominations for two members from each side of the House to sit on the Select Committee to review the standing orders. To date, we have gotten a response from the Honourable Leader of Government Business, who has submitted the two nominees to sit on that Select Committee, and so we await the information from the Leader of the Opposition as to his two nominees. Once we would have gotten that information, the intention is for us to come to Parliament and present a resolution to formally establish that Select Committee. Those are my announcements.
Presentation of papers and of reports from committees. Petitions. Government notices. Unofficial notices. Questions. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers. personal explanations, motions relating to the business of the National Assembly and moved by a minister. Introduction of bills and first reading.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your leave, I rise on this occasion to present for the first reading. Sorry. Mr. Speaker, sir, with your leave, I rise on this occasion to seek to introduce and to have read for the first time the bill shortly entitled Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020.
I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the bill entitled the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020 be read a first time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to facilitate the provision of advance information relating to cargo and passengers of a conveyance to share the information with other states with a view to identifying cargo and persons that may pose risks to security while facilitating trade through electronic data interchange and for matters connected therewith, otherwise known as the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020.
I rise, Mr. Speaker, with your leave, and this time it is to introduce and to have read for the first time Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court Judicial Officers Pensions Bill 2020.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court Judicial Officers Pension Bill 2020 be read a first time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to provide for pensions and gratuities payable in respect of the service of judicial officers of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court and for related matters, otherwise known as the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court Judicial Officers Pensions Bill 2020.
The bill has been read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to introduce and have read for the first time the bill shortly entitled the National Assembly Elections Amendment Bill 2020.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the National Assembly Elections Amendment Bill 2020 be read a first time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the National Assembly Elections Act, Cap 2.01, otherwise known as the National Assembly Elections Amendment Bill 2020.
The bill has been read a first time.
Public Business Bills, second reading.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise on this occasion, Mr. Speaker, to present for the second reading and debate the Advanced Cargo Information Bill. This bill, Mr. Speaker, seeks to facilitate the provision of advance information relating to cargo and passengers of a conveyance, and to share the information with other states with a view to identifying the cargo and persons that may pose risks to security, while at the same time it is intended to facilitate trade through electronic data interchange and for matters connected therewith. In a manner of speaking, Mr. Speaker, the bill could be considered a companion bill to the Advanced Passenger Information Bill, which was passed several years ago when we were in the midst of the World Cup cricket and matters of security plague the region. Mr. Speaker, in an effort to mitigate the threats emanating from international trade, CARICOM impacts, that is the implementing agency and crime and security, and the member states, including, of course, St. Kitts and Nevis, are moving towards implementing best practice measures as it relates to trading across borders. And one of the best practice measures is really encapsulated in the bill that is now being debated in the House. Mr. Speaker, if we were to turn to Clause 2 of the bill, it defines the meaning of advanced cargo information. And it says, among other things, that the advanced cargo information, abbreviated ACACI, means manifest, airway bill, and bill of lading information or data sets set out in the first schedule in respect of A, the cargo and stores, including all imports, exports in transit, and the transshipment of goods, and B, any package of which there is no bill of lading or airway bill on board a conveyance. It goes on, Mr. Speaker, to speak to the ACI hit and other matters related to this particular definition of advanced cargo information system. The definition refers, of course, to the first schedule, and it seeks to outline the exact data elements that would be required to be entered or inputted in the advanced cargo information system. What is different to what we are attempting to advance now and what exists now? Historically, I am advised that the Customs and Excise Department, under the Customs Act number 19 of 2014, required the prior notification of arrival. Though this allowed for the submission of a declaration prior to the arrival of the conveyance into the Federation, the legislation did not mandate the data elements for such submissions. So there was a void there. Due to this lack of clarity, the Customs and Excise Department was in certain cases only able to secure the bare minimum information from the manifest declaration. Mr. Speaker, this lack of information has posed a significant challenge for the Customs and Excise Department to be able to identify to a sufficient degree of certainty the threats posed by incoming consignments to the Federation. This in turn has hindered the department in its ability to effectively implement a proper risk management system. The Department has therefore found that the information derived from the manifest system has proven to be inadequate for our contemporary framework and the complex challenges now faced by border control. And of course, this has to do with the importation of illicit goods into the Federation, whether they be drugs, contraband, counterfeit, whatever it is. Those are some now of the security threats which border control all over have to relate to and respond to. Mr. Speaker, the bill proposes to introduce in the first schedule a methodology for the inputting of 104 data elements into the Advanced Cargo Information System. And of the 104 data elements, 71 of them are compulsory. The remainder, of course, would be optional. This means that 68% of the data fields have to be filled in. This is a significant amount of relevant information that would now be made available to better assist the Customs and Excise Department in assessing the risks that each consignment poses to the Federation. Mr. Speaker, when the bill passes, it is anticipated that the information provided by the Advanced Cargo Information System would help to ensure that the Customs and Excise Department would be better placed to protect the Federation and the region from threats emanating from international trade. Mr. Speaker, in Clause 2 of the bill, the expression ACI hit is defined to mean a cargo manifest, airway bill or bill of lading, or any documentation that has been flagged by the Advanced Cargo Information System. This definition is of significant importance to the effectiveness of the bill, since it speaks to elements of a system that would be used to identify these suspicious consignments. So wherever there is a hit so defined, it means that through the regional system, there is some measure of concern regarding the particular cargo, and law enforcement and border control is therefore put on higher alert. Under Clause 2 of the bill, the expression regional space refers to the collective territories of the parties to ACIS, which comprise, in the main, CARICOM member states. This arrangement, Mr. Speaker, therefore hails another important milestone in the process at CARICOM integration, as member states move towards implementing the necessary security arrangements to provide for increased trade among CARICOM states. Additionally, the proposed system highlights the wisdom of member states of CARICOM in recognizing that in order to have sustained success in the fight against transnational crime, we must have a united approach. And in this regard, it's important to note that the bill we are moving to the Parliament now would, in a similar way, be moved to all the parliaments of member states of CARICOM as we move to have a harmonized piece of legislation everywhere, compatible and in sync with each other, so that information can be shared and the same approaches basically are being followed. Mr. Speaker, with this in mind, we are able to appreciate that in this regard, it is not just one nation attempting on its own to secure its borders. It is all the member states of the CARICOM region which are attempting to do so. So in this manner, Mr. Speaker, the forces of integration are saying instead of insularity, we must show solidarity. The forces of integration recognize that the criminals have no respect for our borders, and thus we must have a holistic and unified approach if we want to maintain, in the context of St. Kitts and Nevis, a beautiful country in which peace abounds. Mr. Speaker, it must be remembered that if we are moving towards deeper integration with the intent to encourage greater interregional trade and travel, we must be in a better position to mitigate the threats emanating from not only international but regional trade and travel. Thus, there is the establishment of a watch list, as defined in Clause 2, and this list is deemed necessary to track the current activity or movement of criminals and suspicious or prohibited cargo, including terrorists and other persons and cargo of interest to the CARICOM community. We turn to Clause 3 of the bill, which imposes an obligation to provide information. This provision seeks to ensure that there is a mandatory requirement for submission of the advance cargo information as required by the data fields, 104 of them, and these data fields are listed in the first and second schedules. According to Clause 3, the master or agent of the master or every cargo reporter of a conveyance, whether laden or in ballast, shall, prior to arrival of the conveyance in St. Christopher and Nevis, provide to the proper officer, that is, the customs officer so designated, through the ACIS cargo and passenger information detail that are set out in the first and second schedule. The first schedule, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the data fields pertaining to cargo, while the second schedule speaks to data fields pertaining to passengers. This further establishes ACIS as the sole point of submission, and it is expected that ACIS would be fully integrated with what is now known as the ASICUDA system in place in all customs departments within the region. The ACIS would also allow for the electronic submission of all cargo manifests to the regional centralized systems, and that is part of the beauty of it. So the information is simultaneously being shared across member states electronically. The Customs and Excise Department seeks to maximize on the critical experience gained from the AP system, that is the system that deals primarily with advanced information with respect to people. The advanced passenger system introduced useful tools such as a screening process and sharing of security information. These same methods now would be applied to the process of cargo being imported in St. Kitts and Nevis. Clause 3, subsection 2 of the bill recognizes that there may be unforeseen circumstances that may prevent the submission of the required information in advance. And in this regard, it provides for a waiver, and it empowers the Comptroller of Customs to exempt the master of the conveyance from the requirements set out in Schedules 1 and 2. Under Clause 3, Subsection 2, Subsection B of the bill, however, the Comptroller is required to establish alternative notification arrangements for the conveyance. And Subsection 4 of Clause 3 of the bill speaks to a case where a conveyance is forced to make what is referred to as a technical stop. What then are examples of technical stop? The plane, the boat, may be compelled by an emergency to come into the territorial space of St. Kitts and Nevis. And in that regard, this unintended entry into our territorial space for that particular incident, there can be a waiver, and most likely there will be, with respect to the non-supply of the information in advance. Other circumstances which would warrant a waiver would be in the case of accident, unfavorable weather conditions, or other necessity. Mr. Speaker, the bill allows for certain conditions to apply in these cases. And the bill at Subsection 5, Clause 3, Subsection 5, allows for the Comptroller of Customs to waive the requirement for a master to provide the advance information as required under Subsection 1, and in that regard, Schedules 1 and 2, subject to certain conditions that the Comptroller of Customs would prescribe. And this is in the case of a military or law enforcement aircraft or vessel, special dispensation, and of course, an official state visit. That is, we have heads of states or diplomats, even in our built-out of the Emergency Powers Act with respect to COVID, there was a special exemption provided for dignitaries, if you will, persons of diplomatic standing entering into the Federation. So that is, of course, is part of the immunity and part of the good governance with respect to which our international relations are being built. Penalty, Mr. Speaker. The penalty for breach of the law are set out in penalties, are set out in Clause 4. And in the committee stage, we may make a minor amendment where it says the penalty would be a fine of $30,000 each. And I gather this $30 penalty, $30,000 in penalty, is consistent with Section 18, Subsection 5 of the Customs Act now in vogue, that is number 19 of 2014. There is a fine of $30,000, but there also is the incarceration provision, that is, let's go back, imprisonment to a term of 2 years, and we will make a minor insertion when we get there to say a term not exceeding 3 years. So it could be 1 week if you are lucky, it could be 2 years, it could be 2.5 years, it could be up to 3 years. We want to give that discretion to the judicial officials, and so we will just make that minor change later on. Clause 5 of the bill relates to the use of advanced information. A whole lot of information, 104 fields, are to be provided to the Controller of Customs. How will this information be used? Had to be used in a safe way, and it has to be used in a manner that respects privacy, etc., and security of data. So Clause 5 of the bill speaks to this particular matter. And in that vein, the information submitted into the ACES system may be disclosed by the Comptroller of Customs, who may disclose or authorize the disclosure of any document or information in accordance with data protection law. And in this Parliament, in our first term, we did bring legislation relating to data protection and data privacy. The Comptroller of Customs can disclose information as required on the laws dealing with electronic crimes and any other relevant law in accordance with treaty arrangements and agreements concluded by the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. Clause 5 of subsection 2 speaks to some of the types of information which can be disclosed, and among them are past travel movements, general history, and the modus operandi of specified persons. The pattern of behavior may be helpful to the successful prosecution of a case, and in this regard, this particular legislative enactment makes provision for disclosure. Currency and documents relating to other relevant financial transactions, including money laundering. So we see that the criminal element, the criminal mind, the criminal operations are what the piece of legislation is intending to disrupt by having information being made available to law enforcement in advance of the arrival of the cargo and the arrival of persons or passengers. Information can be provided to assist intelligence analysis, assessments, and reports. And the details about known or suspected involvement in illicit activities become important. The phraseology of illicit actions, illicit actors, came to vogue in St. Kitts and Nevis in May of 2014, when the US government said that the last administration had lost its confidence because that administration, now rejected, was involved with illicit actors and accommodating them. And as a consequence, the United States government blacklisted us. There was an advisory issued by the US Treasury. So we understand what these illicit actors mean and what is the substance of the meaning being conveyed by that designation. Subsection 5 of the bill says, impacts. This is a regional crime and security body established on the treaty arrangement in 2006 shall use the cargo and passenger data to conduct screening against databases and watch lists of cargo, crew members, passengers on the conveyances that enter into, depart from, and move within the regional space. Again, impacts is the entity to which most of this collaboration will basically take place. So what our Customs Department is unable to do, having regard to its own database, we can depend upon the regional system, as we do in all sorts of crime fighting efforts in St. Kitts and Nevis. We collaborate with the regional organization to help us provide information in our fight against crime. And then, Mr. Speaker, it goes on to say how this information will be used and the screening, etc., that will take place by impacts. And in a similar way as it does locally for the Customs and Excise Department, it says basically how these information can be used by the regional entity. The kinds of information will be real-time notification and pre-alerts in respect to threats emanating from international trade, trade in contrabands, trade in drugs, trade in arms and ammunitions. All these are serious threats globally, and St. Kitts and Nevis, as a responsible country and a responsible member of the international community, must play our role. The requirements, of course, are listed, but we point to the need for improvements in trader compliance, which would result in increases in revenue collection. And this is important for us as a government as we pursue law enforcement. It comes with a high cost. In fact, the significant investment we have made across the board in law enforcement in St. Kitts and Nevis, that investment has been at an all-time high. We have invested in every area: the customs, the police, the prisons, the defense force, the fire services, every area of law enforcement. We have invested significantly over the last 5 years, and we continue to do so because the security of this state must never be taken for granted. Mr. Speaker, I want to move to Clause 6, and Clause 6 speaks to retention of advanced information. And this matter we have had to confront from time to time, even as we pass freedom of information law. How long should information be validly be kept? Because there is a cost to preserving information and in managing the information that is with the government. Clause 6 says that such information will be retained for the period of 7 years from the submission of the information in ACIS, that is the Advanced Cargo Information System. Again, I'm advised that this is consistent with the requirement under Section 99 of the Customs Act number 19 of 2014. Clause 7 relates to the power of the minister, and in this case, the minister with responsibility for customs, the Minister of Finance in the case of St. Kitts and Nevis. The minister is empowered to make amendments to the schedules, and there are 3 in this bill, and to make regulations that may prescribe procedures for the reporting and processing of the cargo information. Mr. Speaker, the 3rd schedule of the bill speaks to data submission time frames, and you will observe that there are different time frames are provided for cargo, moving by air, moving by sea, and moving by road. And of course, we have long-haul traffic and short-haul, and so the times for submission of the information basically take that or those differences into account. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the cost of the ACIS. Mr. Speaker, it is anticipated that this proposed advanced cargo information system would come at no significant cost to the cargo reporters. Cargo reporters would now be able to access the system using a secure web page, and they would not require specialized equipment or software to make submissions into the system. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, cargo reporters, businesses, and consumers would benefit from improved facilitation of legitimate cargo. And at the fulcrum of this, we are attempting to ensure only legitimate cargo enters the territorial space of St. Kitts and Nevis. So cargo reporters would now be able to access the system using the secure web page, etc. And we talk about the improved facilitation of legitimate cargo. This improvement would flow from the expected increase in efficiency of cargo reporting, having one system for submissions from multiple jurisdictions. So once you enter once, you need not enter for each destination you would go. And of course, the anticipated reduction of clearance times by the use of the risk assessment and the improve in the quality assurance. Mr. Speaker, the Advanced Cargo Information System forms a critical part of the World Customs Organization's safe framework of standards and therefore assists participating countries to standardize and harmonize their electronic cargo information, all in support of regional and international trade. Access to regional and international intelligence database, which is what Impacts would provide, through the receipt of real-time notification and pre-alerts, improves the sharing of information between customs departments all over. These improvements in the screening of goods moving across our borders, Mr. Speaker, along with the present screening of passengers and crew, would provide an additional deterrent to international terrorism, transnational organized crime, and those who traffic in illegal narcotics, firearms, and ammunition. This would no doubt result in the improvement of the safety and security of citizens, residents, and visitors alike. And we could well relate to that in the context of the prior years, of the frequency in which we had incidents involving guns, in the certain knowledge that we are not a producer of guns and therefore they had to be coming in from elsewhere. We could well appreciate that every gun that law enforcement takes from off the street, that makes our country safer. And it is a safer and stronger future to which we are pledged. Mr. Speaker, these improvements in our levels of safety and security would not come at the expense of trade facilitation. On the contrary, I'm advised that ACES would improve trade facilitation. It would achieve this by allowing the Customs and Excise Department to better separate high-risk and low-risk cargo consignments, thus allowing for faster releasing times for legitimate cargo and increased detection of high-risk goods. Further, Mr. Speaker, the system should also allow for the potential increase in revenue collection through improvements in trader compliance and reporting. We spoke about the 104 data fields in the bill that is before us, a significant number of the data elements are with respect to declared values and seal details, 14 of them, enumerated number 66 to 79. We have value freight code, prepaid or collect indicator of the value code, the amount for the value code, the currency code, the customs value of goods, the customs currency code, the insurance costs of the goods, insurance currency code, overall freight costs, overall freight currency, etc., etc. When this information is provided in advance, the Customs Department have a more reliable basis on which to judge the valuation that people are putting on goods. Sometimes, Mr. Speaker, there are actors who will buy at one price and report at another price. And the Customs Department have to use their own independent judgment in attempting to ascertain what is the true value of the goods being brought into the country. The ACE system, by requiring these bits of data to be inputted in advance and showing the valuation given for insurance from supplier, etc., makes it less possible, not impossible, for people to hide their true value. So when people bring in goods and they have one price for customs and one price for something else, we are able to go through this in advance. And we are going to be able to at least slow it down. We are going to be able to bring the full force of the law in relation to a number of entities in the country that we suspect and we are investigating with respect to the under-invoicing of cargo, denying the country a legitimate source of its revenue, and denying the country of the opportunities for these legitimate revenues to be applied in the upliftment of our people. So in closing then, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we are moving ahead with this regional effort at improving the security situation within the region, not just in St. Kitts and Nevis, through this particular piece of legislation. But it's more than just security. It is more than just preventing unauthorized cargo, contraband, counterfeit products into our territorial space. It's also about ensuring that we have the facilitation of business in the country. It's also about our being able to efficiently process cargo leaving and coming into St. Kitts and Nevis by utilizing well-established risk assessment measures. And importantly, for those of us who have to watch the national purse, is that we must avoid leakages in revenues that are intended and should be going into the treasury of the country. So I want to wish this bill safe passage to the Parliament. I want to commend Comptroller of Customs, Mr. Butler, for his fine leadership so far of the Customs Department, to thank his senior officers who have come out in support of the bill. I gather that they have read it in advance. It's an advanced information, cargo information bill, and so they should have read it already, that like their counterparts elsewhere within CARICOM, they give their fullest support. So again, Mr. Butler and your High Command, I want to thank you all for your work, to encourage you to continue to be the best border control officers anywhere in the world. May God bless you and may God bless our Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Christopher 7 and Prime Minister Dr. Harris. I recognize the Honourable Attorney General Vincent Byron Jr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend my support to the mover of the bill shortly entitled the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020. And I rise as well to second the bill that's currently before the House. As the short title indicates, Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to facilitate the provision of advanced information relating to cargo on board aircrafts or vessels entering and leaving the jurisdiction of St. Kitts and Nevis. And like the mover, the Honourable Prime Minister, member for number 7 before me, I too want to acknowledge the presence here today of the Controller of Customs, Mr. Butler, and his senior management team have come to lend support to this bill as we debate it here in Parliament. Mr. Speaker, the bill is based on a CARICOM regional initiative, and the model law is intended to be implemented within a harmonized legal framework throughout the region. In that connection, the bill would seek to provide for the sharing of information with other CARICOM member states with a view to enhancing border security control efforts in relation to the movement of cargo. Mr. Speaker, the bill is in fact the result of a number of years of collaborative work between the regional customs departments and the Joint Regional Communication Center, CC. The center is the sub-agency responsible for both advanced passenger information and advanced cargo information in the region. It is a clearinghouse of intelligence and information to help us in our security systems. Mr. Speaker, the regional cooperation on this matter is essential since the proper administration of an advanced cargo information system may be costly for customs and other stakeholders. Additionally, an approach that is not cooperative and that is inconsistent within the region would likely increase the cost of proper regional implementation. Mr. Speaker, there are also important benefits for businesses and regional governments. In that vein, a harmonized and standardized approach within the region is advantageous for all member states and would support more efficient border control, resulting in reductions in redundant inspections, storage, and costs related to delays. Mr. Speaker, at the national level, the bill will provide for better risk analysis for cargo entering and leaving the Federation. It is anticipated that the bill would facilitate the more efficacious utilization of electronic advanced cargo information and relevant data sets of information to identify high-risk cargo prior to arrival. The Customs Department would also be afforded additional time to scrutinize consignments prior to their arrival in the territory and to take appropriate steps for the purposes of safety and security. Mr. Speaker, the bill would also seek to ensure that the Customs Department is better able to separate cargo shipments into different categories and more efficiently match resources to the specific small number of shipments that require the maximum intervention of the Customs Department. In other words, Customs would be more efficient at tracking, monitoring, and profiling cargo as it enters St. Kitts and Nevis. As a consequence, this is expected to facilitate a more expeditious process for the clearance of low-risk consignments. In time, Mr. Speaker, the enactment of this law would lead to the building of capacity to make more informed decisions on interdiction of goods at the borders, and this would likely result in a more secure supply chain, as well as enhanced trade facilitation and economic growth. Mr. Speaker, the Customs Department remains resolute as it continues to seek to ensure that our laws and regulatory system aligns with both existing international standards and business practices applicable to the movement of cargo. Mr. Speaker, one of the advantages that the advanced cargo information should provide is that of enhanced security both domestically and regionally. In fact, one of the key recommendations for our CFATF obligations, that is the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force obligations, is the ability to provide a sound, efficient, and secure cross-border control network. And in that vein, Mr. Speaker, this bill is a reminder that effective law enforcement and national security are far-reaching and complex endeavors. We cannot rely solely on the efforts of the police, and so we have to recognize the important and critical work of the customs in our jurisdiction. In that regard, Mr. Speaker, both our domestic security and our international obligations compel us to seek to eliminate, prevent, and to detect money laundering, drug and arms trafficking, and other illicit trade which can contribute to the proceeds of crime. Fraudulent invoices and smuggling of goods are also elements that need to be monitored and controlled. Mr. Speaker, the salient and substantive provisions of the bill provide for the mandatory or compulsory provision of cargo information and certain relevant passenger information in advance of its arrival into the Federation. And in that regard, Mr. Speaker, we would note that when we come to committee stage, that we will be making certain minor modifications, as being pointed out by the mover of the bill, in relation to some of the clauses in the bill. And I would like to turn very briefly and reiterate, to go over some of the sections as has been enumerated by the mover. The Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020 has some 6 sections. It has a short title and commencement. It has an interpretation clause. Clause 3 speaks to the duty to provide information. Clause 4, the use of advanced information. 5, the retention of advanced information, as has been stressed by the mover, and the powers of the minister when it comes to enhancing the role of the bill, of the act as when it's passed. And again, it says in its said note, a bill to facilitate the provision of advanced information relating to cargo and passengers of a conveyance, to share the information with other states with a view of identifying the cargo and persons that may pose risks to security while facilitating trade through electronic data interchange and for matters connected therewith. That basically is what we debate here today. And of course, interpretation section is critical because it speaks to advanced cargo information. ACI means manifest, it means an area bill, it means a bill of lading information or data set out in the first schedule in respect of cargo, stores, including all imports, exports in transit and transmission of goods, and B, any package of which there is no bill of lading or area bill on board of any conveyance. And it goes on to describe a number of sections of what the air cargo information system is. When we come to our committee stage, Mr. Speaker, we would want to modify the term, community when it comes to the term watch list, and to change that. In the interpretation section, watch list means a list that is used to watch or track the current activity or movements of criminals and suspicious or prohibited cargo, including terrorists, other persons and cargo of interest to the community. We'll be asking the House to interpret that to mean the definition of the term watch list and to replace the expression community with the expression Caribbean community CARICOM, so that we'll more specify it when we come to the committee stage. We'd also want, Mr. Speaker, that we'd want clause 3 to be noted, that it provides for the duty, the terms and conditions for relevant persons to provide advanced cargo information to appropriate authorities. It says duty to provide information, and the master, agent of the master, or every cargo reporter of a conveyance, whether laden or in ballast, shall, prior to arrival of the conveyance in St. Christopher and Nevis, provide to the proper officer through the ACE's cargo and passenger information set out in the first and second schedules. And it goes on to explain other duties that are required as we go forth. Mr. Speaker, Clause 4 provides for a penalty of $30,000, and as the bill stands now, or 3 years imprisonment for breach of the provisions of the law. And I would want to say, as the mover of the bill has stated before, that we would want to modify this particular clause at committee stage, where it has, as it is stated here, a mandatory option of imprisonment for a term of 3 years, to make it more amenable to our judicial system, where in a summary court, a magistrate's court, the judicial officer will have the discretion to apply the clause. And here we will term it a term of imprisonment not exceeding 3 years or up to 3 years. The judicial officer has that discretion when it comes to these matters. In clause 5, Mr. Speaker, the bill provides for the legitimate use and sharing of the advanced cargo information, and under clause 5, provision will be made for the lawful sharing of that information amongst CARICOM, regional customs departments, to the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security. Very critical regional security arm known as IMPACS, and a sub-agency that has been referred to before, that is the Joint Regional Communication Center of JRCC. In clause 6, Mr. Speaker, this provides for the retention of cargo advance information for a period of 7 years. And the move of the bill has indicated that this is in keeping with the Customs Act that has already governs the work of the customs in our federation. The retention of advanced passenger information relevant for the purposes of this bill would be addressed in accordance with the APIS Act 2017. And in that regard, at committee stage, the citation for the advanced passenger information bill, which is in this bill, will be corrected to refer to the year 2017 when it was passed, and instead of 2019. In clause 7, Mr. Speaker, this provides for the powers of the minister, and the minister responsible for customs, and in this case the Minister of Finance, to amend the first schedule and the third schedule of the bill. The clause also provides for the power of the minister to make relevant regulations, and in that connection the first schedule provides detailed information on the advanced cargo information for the electronic manifest management of the automated system for customs data, known as ASICUDA. He, as the mover, mentioned that there are some 104 fields that are set out in this ACES data elements chart, and go to all things like bills, packages, containers, vehicles, gross weights. These are mandatory things that must be given, and a whole list of data elements that are critical to the work of customs as they protect our borders and ensure that relevant taxes and duties are paid. Mr. Speaker, the second schedule details the nature of advanced passenger information that would be relevant for the purposes of this law. And the third schedule provides for the timeframes for advanced cargo data submission. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the introduction of the proposed new legislative framework for advanced cargo information would undoubtedly enhance and strengthen the capacities of our Customs Department to serve us in a manner that would further fortify our legal system, that it would enhance our national border security control system, and also advance global security. And I would want to wish it safe passage to this Honorable House. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, the Honorable Attorney General. I recognize the Honorable Minister of State, Wendy Phipps.
My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too seek your leave to rise and make a small intervention on the debate for the bill before us, shortly entitled the Advanced Cargo Information Bill. Essentially, Mr. Speaker, I think that the honorable mover of the bill has done an excellent job in terms of laying out the various sections, all 7 sections, as well as the 3 schedules and the general ethos behind the bill that is before us. Like him and the Honorable Attorney General, I would also like to join in my commendation of the Customs and Excise Department in the support they would have put behind this piece of legislation that is intended to be adopted across all of the member states of CARICOM. The Customs and Excise Department has demonstrated over the years their own commitment to ensuring compliance and safety and security, as well as border management for St. Kitts and Nevis, and as such, we commend them for their efforts. But if I could briefly put into context why we are here, without belaboring the points already laid out by the 2 previous speakers, I would hasten to add that the Advanced Cargo Information System really has come about from about the 1980s, where the UN Conference on Trade and Development would have begun a process of looking at developing countries across the world in terms of their transport chain components, and to look to see where those trading systems may have had physical as well as non-physical obstacles that were designed to impede trade. And what you wanted is trade facilitation at all costs, bearing in mind some of the benefits laid out by the previous speakers as to why, when you put something like this in place, you gain all of the necessary benefits, including reduction in risk, revenues for governments being optimized in terms of those generated by customs, etc. And as such, what UNCTAD would have done, the same United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, would have been a critical assessment of the member states' levels of development. They would have also done similar exercises in the African Union, throughout the continent, starting in territories such as Lesotho and so forth, in terms of looking at where the weaknesses existed and trying as best as possible to come up with systems that would make sure we have a more well-defined, global, synchronized space in which we do business that cuts down on the impediments, the illicit actors, fraud, and everything else that would hamper global development. And to prove that the Customs and Excise Department had remained on top of things, as recently as January of 2019, St. Kitts and Nevis would have played host to a regional workshop here from Impacts, looking at the same ACES system that would eventually be coming on stream. And then by around May of 2019, several months later, we would have had Grenada coming out first in terms of the implementation of the ACES, followed by Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and then Dominica. So of course, we are now following these particular territories in putting in place the Advanced Cargo Information System, which, if my research is correct, based on our context in the region, since ACES is a generic term, is that our system would be part of EMA, which is the Electronic Manifest Management Executor System, thereby calling it EMA, as I stated earlier. What I would want to do with the little bit of time that I promised to be on the floor is to basically remind us that what we are really trying to do is to implement a toolbox that really creates a set of transportation logistical information that we can then use to render technical assistance for trade facilitation. That is it in a nutshell. We are trying to use this toolbox, electronically generated, so that the transport logistics information system that we want to develop will actually be made possible, or improved rather, by having the necessary technical assistance inbuilt into it to have the trade facilitation at an optimal level that we desire. And once that is in place, and thankfully, as the Honourable Mover of the bill has indicated, it is not something that is costing St. Kitts and Nevis a fortune, because the entire program has been funded by the 10th European Development Fund because of the leadership of Impacts in taking the charge to implement this throughout the entire region. So by putting the system in place at no real cost to us other than the commitment and the human resource training that would be needed to guide it and power it, because we all know that in the best of times you can put the world's greatest computer information system in place, but if the people who power them are not up to date and the data you're putting in isn't correct, you have garbage in, garbage out. So we would have to have the contingent training and updating of that system and the training continuously over time so that we remain current. But if I could get to some of the benefits of the ACI, some of which the previous speakers have noted. One, it is that you will have the benefit, obviously, of having the cargo information available before arrival, and this is critical. Just about 3 days ago, there was a news item coming out of the VI Consortium, which indicated that in Puerto Rico, at the port, I think it was just on Monday, a series of containers, some on pallets, some on little ordinary cardboard boxes, which were assumed to have been just holding contents of home goods, things that you would generally ship in a barrel from the States or whatever. No one paid attention to it until somebody decided to wisen up and say, let's see what's in some of these boxes. If the advanced cargo information system in the US, of all places, had been working properly, you would have avoided what you discovered shortly thereafter, which is the discovery that in cellophane-wrapped containers on pallets with what appeared to be boxes of home goods was $27 million in raw cash, destined for St. Thomas. So the bill that we are debating today basically has good force and good oomph behind of it in terms of preventing things like what just happened in Puerto Rico 3 days ago. Okay? We go on to other benefits. Reduce port agents' costs. The Honourable Mover of the bill spoke to that, because let us not forget, we are monitoring movement of goods, but not just goods coming in. We are monitoring goods going out, because St. Kitts and Nevis is still very much an export nation by virtue of the manufacturing presence that we are still privileged to have here in the Federation. There's also the benefit of the real-time follow-up in terms of transactions, because once the system is up and running, everybody who is online will have access to it right away. Of course, this means, as noted earlier, that you will have the generation of trade intelligence that tells you what is being moved between borders, what to do about it, and how the necessary interdiction measures will be needed to put in place to avert these problems that can be arising as a result of the work of illicit actors. The other issue that I think will be of benefit to us is improved risk management as well as fraud control. The Honourable Mover spoke to that as well in terms of matters such as under-invoicing of goods, where customs has a hard time scratching its head trying to figure out the value of goods and services for which no proper documentation has been provided, etc. Then, of course, you have the benefit based on the high caliber system that is being contemplated to have that system interface with other risk analysis tools. Some of the well-known names coming out of major firms out of Switzerland who deal with public sectors include SGS, such as the Profiler software that can go with the same EMA system once it is set up. And it has the benefit, once you can have that type of interface taking place, that you basically are able to identify the threats that could come up, not just in terms of national security, but also in terms of public health, security in general, the legal aspects of everything else, as it relates to trade, before the cargo arrives in the intended destination. And of course, it can also allow you the benefit to interface with other customs management systems, because obviously the customs and excise departments around the world will not just be operating on just one system thereby calling it ACES. They would have their own internal systems that allow them to monitor cargo and to work in proper fashion with the relevant port authorities who are their primary partners. Essentially, Mr. Speaker, what I would also wish to point to is that for the system to work properly, you must have the close monitoring of the system, you must have the accuracy of recording, and you must ensure that the data in all points would be accurate. It means that not only is the Customs and Excise Department of St. Kitts required to make sure that it is accurate in terms of what it's putting in the system, but it also has to hold the feet of your other colleagues throughout the region to the fire. Because what they put in impacts what you're able to work with at the same time. And as a result of that, it stands to reason then that the World Customs Organizations will have to work very closely together so that you optimize the type of results that you would want to get out of the system. And of course, the results being optimized, again, comes down to a certain extent, not just in terms of remaining current once the system has been put in place, but making sure that the necessary updating of the software, of the technology, the hardcore equipment that is being used will be up to date to meet the challenges. Because let us not think even for a moment that just because we are now going to be part of this EMA system where you have technology at your fingertips, that the criminal element will not be using the same technology to try to outsmart you at what you're trying to overcome. So that too is a consideration going forward. So obviously, what I would wish to say then is that the bill, I wish it safe passage, but at the same time, we would hold a certain level of responsibility right in the lap of the Customs and Excise Department to use the system well, to upgrade it when necessary, to avail yourself of training, to update it, to capitalize it when the time comes for that, and to make sure that you remain current with your training, so that at the end of the day, what we achieve is a system that is comparable to what obtains anywhere else in the world, because regardless of our smallness, we do not get a free pass in terms of presenting ourselves with substandard products and outputs and levels and standards compared to the rest of the world. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, I wish the bill safe passage.
Thank you. Are there any other contributions?
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your leave, Mr. Speaker, I rise to wrap up the debate in relation to the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020. And I would want to place on record my appreciation for the contributions made by the Learned Attorney General and, of course, our Senator and Minister of Labor et al., Senator Phipps. Et al. Covers. And Jade for their contribution, and I hope further elucidation of the purpose of the bill, the benefits, etc., that will accrue from this particular legislation. Importantly, too, was the important perspective regarding the history of this particular initiative to digitalize cargo information that has a long road. And we have come this day to bring St. Kitts further into modernity in terms of the use of this system. We have come this day as part of a regional effort at improving security, at improving efficiency, at improving the ease of doing business. And in that regard, our Customs and Excise Department has always performed as one of the leading customs and excise department in the world. We have a global ranking in terms of the performance of our customs and excise. We've always ranked within the top 10, if my memory serves me right. So again, I want to commend them for that particular role that they have been playing, and to say that we continue to expect outstanding work and leadership from the Customs Department. We note that in our context, in addition to being an important element of our border control law enforcement mechanism, the Customs and Excise Department is the second most important collector of government revenue, largely collections as they relate to international trade. Of course, the Inland Revenue Department is the lead collector of revenue in the country. The Customs Department is the second most important one. I want to recognize, as I started doing, the entire team that is here. We have Mr. Jorma Butler, the Acting Controller of Customs. We have Mr. Reginald Walters, he's our financial analyst. We have Ms. Lonlia Archibald, Senior Assistant Controller of Customs. Desroy Daniel, Assistant Controller of Customs. Elmar Martinez, Assistant Controller of Customs. I want to thank each of them for their outstanding leadership. Some have been with the department for many, many years, and we want to place and record that their service has been excellent and well-deserving of commendation. Mr. Speaker, I won't add more to the conversations and the contributions we have had on this bill. It is critically important that we move forward into the future, again to recommit to the stronger and safer future that we had put for discussion and determination by the public in the run-up to the June 5th general elections, and the people supported that future. Put in that broad context, what we are attempting to do today is to safeguard that future, consolidate it to this piece of legislation. I therefore would ask that the bill be read for the second time and that it goes to the committee stage, with your permission, sir.
Thank you. Honorable move of the bill. The question is that the bill entitled the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020 be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to facilitate the provision of advance information relating to cargo and passengers of a conveyance, to share the information with other states with the view to identifying the cargo and persons that may pose risk to security while facilitating trade through electronic data interchange and for matters connected therewith, otherwise known as the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020.
The bill has been read a second time. House moves into committee.
Clause 1.
The question is that clause 1 stands part of. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, it's proposed to amend the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020 in Clause 1 as follows by replacing by replacing it as follows. I'm sorry. This act may be cited as the Advanced Cargo and the Passenger Information Act 2020 and shall come into force on such date as the minister may, by order, appoint.
The question is that Clause 1, as amended, stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, it is proposed to amend the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020 in Clause 2 in the definition of the term watch list by replacing the expression community with the expression Caribbean Community CARICOM.
The question is that Clause 2, as amended, stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 3.
The question is that Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. Chairman, it is proposed to amend the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020 in Clause 4 by replacing the expression a fine of $30,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 3 years with the expression a fine of $30,000 or to a term of imprisonment not exceeding 3 years.
Honorable member, just a question from me. A fine of 30,000 or not exceeding 30,000?
A fine of $30,000,
Of 30,000.
but not exceeding 3 years in terms of imprisonment. So there is a discretion of the court to either apply a fine of $30,000 or, for that matter, up to 3 years. A discretion to play up to 3 years.
Thank you. The question is that Clause 4, as amended, stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Mr. Chairman, it is proposed to amend the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020 in Clause 5 by replacing the expression data privacy and computer misuse and abuse act, the controller may disclose, with the expression Data Protection Act 2018, Electronic Crimes Act 2009, and any other relevant law the controller may disclose.
The question is that Clause 5, as amended, stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Mr. Chairman, we propose to amend the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020 in Clause 6 by replacing the expression 2019 with the expression 2017.
The question is that Clause 6, as amended, stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Clause 7.
The question is that Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Schedules 1 through 3.
The question is that the schedules stand part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
The enacting clause.
The question is that the enacting clause stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title stands part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House resumes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to report that the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020 has gone through committee stages with several amendments which have been circulated. I would therefore want to request, Mr. Speaker, that we would suspend Standing Order number 57 to allow for the third reading of this bill and to have it passed into law.
The question is that Standing Order 57 be suspended to facilitate the third reading of this bill at today's sitting. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to facilitate the provision of advance information relating to cargo and passengers of a conveyance to share the information with other states with a view to identifying the cargo and persons that may pose risks to security while facilitating trade through electronic data interchange and for matters connected therewith, otherwise known as the Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020.
Titled The Advanced Cargo Information Bill 2020 has been read a third time and passed by this National Assembly. The bill would be submitted to His Excellency, the Governor General, Sir Tapley Seaton, for his assent, following which it will be gazetted and become law of the land.
Motions, resolutions, adjournment,
Mr. Speaker, I rise, and with your leave, I move that the House be adjourned sine die, and I reserve any comments on the adjournment.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The question is, I always like pleasant surprises. Let me interject that first. The question is that this Honorable House stands adjourned sine die. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This Honorable House stands adjourned sine die.
As you settle into the new normal, it's time to get your customers back. Let them know that you're still in business. During the closure, many of your customers found other places to shop, places with competitive prices, smiling store clerks, and great customer service. It's the new normal, and advertising your business is critical. Call the ZIZ Advertising Department